Hi there, I'm Ian Warner, and this is another episode of A Friendly Chat About. You'll notice some changes to the format with this one. Firstly, my overview, my friendly chat about Courtesans, the Weird and Wonderful, is split into three parts because I think each of the three settings I present deserves its own video. Secondly, I've dropped the whole talk about the issues bit because frankly I'm sick of having to justify myself really when it's a fucking game, frankly. It's not good at saying anything particularly profound. It does make you think about issues, but it's not saying anything one way or the other. And frankly, if you can't get that, there's some real problems going on there. Anyway, so I will start going through these. This is the first part of our little chat about Courtesans of Weird and Wonderful, covering vampire courtesans. And let's have a look at vampire courtesans. Inspirations. Well, as the Gentleman Gamer pointed out in his review of WizKid, when you look at supernatural creatures in a role-playing game context, you can't avoid White Wolf and the World of Darkness. It's so ingrained into sort of the basic culture of doing horror in gaming now because of its success that you're going to take something from it. But looking back at World of Darkness, which is the first proper horror game that I played, I saw all sorts of things wrong with their vampire depiction, and I knew that when I went around to do my own proper vampires, not like Bloodsucker where I'm taking the piss, I'd want to do something slightly different. And so I went right back to the source, so to speak. Well, the source in literary terms, and I looked at Carmilla and I looked at Dracula. Now, the vampires you see in the original novels, Carmilla and Dracula, are not the vampires that are depicted in the 30s movies. They're not the vampires depicted in the Hammer movies by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, the Hammer movies seem to have even more weaknesses than any other vampire, and they make new ones up as they go along, which is really strange and disconcerting. But what I decided to do is keep the weaknesses down to the original. That is, bloodlust, they can be decapitated, and staking kills them. The latter, of course, is taking a completely different direction of what I did in Bloodsucker. I was responsible for making staking in Bloodsucker work like it does in the White Wolf games. Now, ironically, in my own vampire game, staking kills you. Very interesting. Garlic, holy water, sunlight. Sunlight, what I understood from the Victorian novels is you do get Dracula, you do get Carmilla walking around during the day, but they're not at their best. They're a bit groggy, they seem to be ill. So I thought, right, well, I'm not going to have it connected to the sun anyway, it's just during sort of the daytime hours, they are perhaps a little money, which is going to be strange in the context of courtesans because of the fact that Well, unless you frame the scene as happening during the day, which you normally wouldn't, or the landlady does so, um, most of your scenes pretty much default to night. So it's not really that much of a weakness. But yeah, I wanted to keep the sort of Victorian vampire, well, Penny Dreadful going into Victorian vampire feel to them. And I think I succeeded in doing that. Um, it's one of those interesting sort of things where you're stepping on popular culture and putting your own twist on it, and there's so many twists. I mean, they sparkle now apparently. um, but yeah, it's a it's an opportunity when you're given something that everybody thinks they know the rules to play with what their expectations, um, and or not in the case of some films. I mean, lesbian vampire killers being one of them, in that all the typical weaknesses work. And Paul McGann's sort of vampire hunting vicar character is a bit confused when suddenly everybody knows how to kill a vampire, and he thought he was the only one, which I thought was quite funny. A bit stupid, but quite funny. Anyway, that's the inspirations. Let's talk about system. System. Now, Vampire Courtesans doesn't diverge too much from irregular courtesans, and in retrospect, that's probably a mistake. Because expanded combat rules will later be developed in the other two settings, which I will go on to in due course, and which I further expanded in Grim and Gritty and in Doxy. They Yeah, I think a player of a vampire character will be a bit disappointed if his character's life, or her character's life and death was determined by a single dice roll. Probably a good idea to use what we have in the single dice roll combat system if you are playing a vampire within a house of mortals and you want to play with basic rules. That's fine, but otherwise I suggest you check out the Grim and Gritty supplement and the Courtesans blog for the rules on how to play a vampire in the regular combat system. That out of the way, what did I do to sort of create a system that... Well, I created the houses. The houses are the replacement for Origins. They do bear some similarities to Origins. Franco's are very Golden Heart-like. Drake's are very Fallen Lady-like. But obviously with vampire weaknesses being infertility and also other things, some of the old weaknesses and strengths don't make any sense, so they've been replaced by more vampire-y ones, and ones that fit within the context of a vampire family. There is a seventh family. Rather than 6 origins, you have 7 families, and that's the Matresse. And the Matresse are your out-and-out Satanists, and they're completely out-of-the-closet Satanists. Very unsubtle, and they're going to cause some problems, especially if they're in a mortal household, because as much as the nobility supported things like the Hellfire Club, I think a Satanist courtesan would raise a few eyebrows, and that's not a good idea with the Drakes about, because one of the strengths the Drakes have is that when a vampire courtesan reaches more than 25 scandal, they are allowed by the vampire establishment to kill that courtesan. So it's all about keeping the silence, and getting too much scandal is going to screw with that. The interesting thing with the male-female dynamic in Vampire Society is The interesting thing about the World of Darkness version is that there is no sexism, which makes no sense in the context of a very conservative, very sort of stuck in their ways society, um, which vampires are by nature of their longevity. So what I did instead was, well, female vampires in Vampire Courtesans have the weakness that they can only turn females, whereas males can turn male and female, which is an interesting little twist on it. But yeah, it's one of those little niggles with in sort of difference between the two genders that sets off this sexism by which a male vampire has and will have in the tough justice setting I'm bringing out lots of options, whereas the female vampire has got courtesan or stake yourself. Basically, it's more fitting to the sort of tone of the Courtesan series that they, and the History Files series in general, that the same sort of sexism that's in Georgian society is in the hidden Georgian society, the Vampire Society. It may be a controversial decision, but frankly, um, it's probably the more realistic one to take. And it's harsh, but that's how things were. Yeah, so apart from that, we've got a load of sort of inbuilt strengths and weaknesses to vampires, which are very long and complicated, and in retrospect, maybe they shouldn't have been. Certainly, when I get round to writing Doxy by Moonlight, which is rules for playing werewolf doxies, I will alter the make sure the rules are kept as simple as possible, because really vampires is a lot to remember, and maybe a summary sheet of some description would be helpful. I can put one together if there are any requests for one. So if I can get the time. Anyway, so yeah, that's the system. I'm not entirely 100% happy with it, and I'm not too happy with the fact that all the art in that section is stock art, rather than, but that was just a budgetary decision more than anything else. I think, yeah, I think it's probably the weaker of the three settings system-wise, but it's good fun, and with a bit of hacking it can work just as well as the other two. So that's Vampire Courtesans. It's the first of the three settings of Courtesans the Weird and Wonderful, available in PDF from RPG Now, and in this lovely print copy from Lulu. It's the first of the three. As I said, it may not be the most mechanically sound of the three, but it's a good start, and I hope to be writing some support material for it in the future if there is the demand for it. And yeah, I will go on to do the other two settings, Fantasy Courtesans and the shamelessly named Courtesans 20,000. These two are fantasy and science fiction respectively, and bring in what I now call the grim and gritty combat system, which is going to be a major feature in a lot of my future work in the Beer and Crisps system. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I look forward to doing some more. Thank you.